The film in which you are about to see is an account of two men's night in a rather irregular cave. In October of 1986, David Jarrard, a staff writer, and Bill Wilson, a staff photographer, both working for a small newspaper in Tennessee, were planning to get to the truth of one of Tennessee's most infamous cave systems, the Bell Witch Cave. The cave itself is a fairly average cave system. Nothing too special. It's approximately 490 feet or 149 meters long. It's also privately owned, and in 1986 was owned by the Eden family, and is located in Adams, Tennessee, which is about 45 minutes from Fort Campbell and about 44 minutes from Nashville. It's actually the history behind the cave that makes it rather off. You see, in 1804, John Bell would decide to move from North Carolina to the 320-acre farm that resides over the cave. For more than a decade, he lived in relative peace. That was until the summer of 1817. According to legend, they began to see strange-looking animals walking around the farm occasionally, and would start to hear knocking on the doors and walls at night. On top of that, they would also hear rats chewing on their bedposts at night, but with no signs of gnawing the next morning. Chains dragging around the house, the sounds of huge stones dropping all around them, and weird gulping and choking sounds coming at night. Eventually, whatever it was that was tormenting them showed itself. Apparently, it was a witch named Kate Bates who used to live in the area. After revealing herself, the ghost would torment the family for the next 3 years. Mainly John Bell and his daughter, Betsy Bell. She would usually torture them by pinching, scratching them, sticking them with sewing needles, and even going as far as beating them. Eventually, John Bell would pass away in 1820 from a suspected poisoning, though no test could have been performed to tell for sure at the time. After John Bell's death, it was revealed that Kate Bates was actually once John Bell's girlfriend. And early in the 19th century, they were actually engaged to be married. Their plans were ruined, and engagements were later broken off. John would later marry a woman named Lucy. Kate would find out and become furious. She would then desperately try to break them up. After a couple of years of Kate trying to break them up, John would become tired of this and snap. It was said that he knocked her out and would bring her down to his basement, where he would then starve her to death and bury her body inside the cave system. After this, the family would eventually move away from the farm, which would then switch hands multiple times until it found its way into the Eden family. In October of 1986, the two journalists David Jarrard and Bill Wilson decided they would spend the night to prove the legends wrong, and finally be able to lay this story to rest forever. They started the day by attending a guided tour of the cave. Nothing too eventful, just the owners mainly telling ghost stories about the cave from decades past. Even David remembers thinking to himself how uneventful and boring this tour actually was. Though as soon as the tour was over, they had received permission from the owners that they could spend the night. And although they were warned that not even them as owners would dare go into the cave by themselves, let alone at night. However, undaunted, they wished them luck and went on their ways. They weren't fazed at all though. After all, the cave itself wasn't really that intimidating at all. And truth be told, they didn't believe in ghosts nor had a reason to fear them at all. And remembered telling each other, big deal, and it's just a grunge hole anyway. They were in the first of two rooms, or a large opening within the cave. This is where they would sleep for the night, and although this area was well lit by overhead lights, it was also in a very peculiar place. You see, the cave may have also been an Indian burial ground, because where they were sleeping used to be an empty child's grave as well. As the two started setting up their sleeping bags and equipment for the night, Bill would start looking around and would say, "You know, it's not the witch in this cave that scares me the most. Do you know what a brown recluse spider looks like?" As he said this, his flashlight started to pan around the room to a pitted rock wall on the far side of the room. It was covered from top to bottom in deadly spiders, including one the size of a $50. There were so many we couldn't even count them all, they said. It would then be at this time that they would hear their first noise. It wasn't loud at first, it just caught them off guard, as it was just a new sound in a relatively quiet cave. They weren't exactly sure what they just heard, but they were sure that it just came from the second room, just a few feet behind them. The two would then slowly walk towards the second room, although it was pitch dark. they would slowly peer into the room to see if they could hear the noise again. Just then, the noise came again, only this time it was louder. A raspy, deep sound like an unwavering groan or deep electric buzzer with a weak battery, which lasted around 5 seconds. It was then followed by several loud, deep thumps. "Did you hear that?" David would ask Bill. "I have never heard a noise like that in a cave before in my life," exclaimed Bill. And Bill was no stranger to caves, as he was also a member of the National Speluncaphobia Society and had explored miles of cave systems of all shapes and sizes located in Tennessee and Alabama. So he was usually rather comfortable in caves and usually felt right at home. This, though, he said, made him feel immediately uneasy, as this was no cave noise he had ever heard before. Just then, there was a third growl-like sound that pierced the cave. Only this time, it was worse, even louder than before, even to the point where it overpowered their own voices, and sounded like it was now coming right from around the corner. "Let's go," Bill yelled out. They went to the gate about 20 yards away and decided to look back inside the cave. They both had a feeling of being watched, someone just staring daggers at them. They would then sit there trying to rationalize what had actually happened, trying to come up with an explanation. They would look around the cave to see if anyone was actually outside making the noises, but all they saw were fireflies and darkness. They then looked around to see if anyone could have snuck into another entrance in order to make the sound. Maybe ran back out, but there were no other entrances to the cave. Maybe it was loudspeakers then. Maybe there were loudspeakers set up in the second room making the noise somehow. After all, this was a spooky tourist destination. One would think they would have something set up to make the ambiance a little spooky, one might think. Though they had remembered that earlier the owner had told them that they didn't have to have any setup. He also went on to say that most likely sound systems and wires and setups like that would most likely be discovered by tourists exploring the cave anyhow, so there was no point. Bill would then say, "But caves don't just growl though. So what was it then?" They then went back inside the cave to search for some wire that might lead to some loudspeakers. And as you can see, they were actually able to find some electrical wires that ran into the inside of the cave. The wires, though, were connected directly into the lights that were strung overhead. They then searched as thoroughly as they could to try to come up with a source, but they came up with nothing. The cave fell silent once more. They were then contemplating just going home and saying the brown recluse spiders were enough to just say no, as one could almost certainly bite them and send them straight to the hospital. But they decided to stay just a little longer. After all, it could have just been their imaginations from hearing all the ghost stories all day leading up to this. They decided to sit quietly in the first room, away from the spider wall, and waited to see if anything else would happen. For about 15 minutes, they heard nothing but the dripping of water coming from deeper inside the cave. Then suddenly, they heard a faint rumbling sound, almost like a thunder coming from the front gate. So they decided to head up there to investigate it. "It's probably just a jet overhead," Bill said, as they walked closer to the entrance. As they reached the gate, a loud, powerful screech hit them from the back of the cave. But the sound wasn't metallic or just a howl of the wind. It was clearly vocal and high-pitched. They quickly looked at each other and left the ground as quickly as possible. When they told their editor the next day, he would explain, "Are you crazy? You ran off by noises? You had a Pulitzer Prize winning story if you could have proven that there were actually ghosts. You should have stayed there and interviewed her." Wanting to let the cave and to a lesser extent their editor have the last laugh, David would drive back to the cave the following Tuesday to see about staying another night there. When he got back to the farm though, he stayed in his car to talk to the owner with his motor still running. During the conversation, David asked the owner, was there anything else that was weird that occurred other than the strange noises? The owner would go on to say, "Well, a lot of people come here and can't leave right away. They'll try to start their car or truck, but nothing will happen, not even a click. And it doesn't even matter how new or old the car or truck is. It happens to them all. It usually takes hours before the cars start back up again, and when they do, they sound like nothing ever happened to them. The mechanics that come up here can't even help and figure out what's going on." As he was telling David about the cars, just a little white steam started to come from David's 1986 Renault, which was brand new at the time. He had turned it off and later would only need a quart of water to top it off from overheating again. What do you guys think? Do you think the Bell Witch Cave is actually haunted? Or do you think there's more to the story than meets the eye? Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notification bell for more content in the future. Goodbye for now.